and I know you have a strong affinity towards Chinese models. But let's kick it off with your experience with Kimi. Which model is it?
2.6.
2.6. You using it quite a lot now, or?
Yeah, I'm in love with it. Basically, I use it now together with Codex, right? So GPT
Yeah.
5.5. And I use Codex 5.5 mainly for like heavy
Yeah.
tasks, right? Like prepare a plan, do some like intense work, etc. In terms of like
Right.
I need more like thinking, but
Yeah.
execution code I rather use Kimi 2.6. It's more affordable. The difference in price in tokens is significant. Both I must say, like Kimi, uh, I have the $40 subscription or
Hmm.
39, right?
Hmm.
For Codex, I have the $20 subscription.
Right. Yeah.
So and that those two, they work pretty well together.
And what is it with? Okay, but let's get into like the nuances of it. So what is it that is so great with Kimi? Like you gotta have a reference point, right? So you're comparing it to Codex or Claude, right? Like one of these, and then you're saying it's comparably like quite good, like not on the planning thing, but on the execution of the actual
Yeah,
code.
but first of all, we need to take into account that I use different clients, agents, right? Like I had a chance to use Cloud before, right? And then obviously that was like Cloud Code desktop app, right?
Yeah,
Codex, I have the Codex desktop application, which is, to be honest, the best from all of them. Like, and
that's
then
true.
I have
That I agree.
Open
Yeah,
Code, and I have a Kimi code connected
yeah,
to it. So basically, the API key from Kimi for coding.
right,
And so I have to switch between those, right? Like I switch between Codex and Open Code.
right.
But yeah, as I said, like thinking wise, I feel like GPT 5.5,
Yeah,
especially the top,
extra
how
high.
it's called, the heavy, extra high,
Yeah, yeah,
is better, right? But for normal coding tasks where you have a plan ready,
yeah.
Kimi is much more affordable, and I don't see that much difference between Codex
Right.
executing the plan and Kimi, right? Executing the plan.
But are there
By
things that you?
affordable, I mean like I pay for subscription, right?
Yeah.
$20 or $40, right?
What?
And I judge it by how quickly I run out of tokens, right?
And dude, it's I gotta say,
It's
I
day
I
and
am
night,
okay.
like yeah.
It's day and night. I agree. I'm using I'm using Claude and Codex only, and it's almost not possible unless, as you said earlier, that you gotta use a lower intelligence level or whatever, like a medium or a low. You can't do that on a $20. You can't do high or extra high you can't bust that constantly. But with Kimi, do you have the intelligence level? So is it just one Kimi 2.6? That's what it is. Or do you have Kimi 2.6 thinking or something like that?
I use the standard Kimi 2.6 configuration in open code. I don't
And
do any modifications like
okay,
in terms of, but the way I work is I tell it what to do. Like I tell it to iterate, and like
yeah,
it's not like I just prompt it and then I wait for the output, and then I spend more time in
yeah,
general working while working with those agents. I spend
yeah.
time on defining the plan, and then I just execute the plan, right? But it's not like I just prompt. I prompt and prompt again on define the plan. I tell the model to also challenge itself, right?
Yeah.
The output, and so and challenge the plan, look for improvements. I tell it to use like a few loops, repeat it a few times, and then I come up with or the agent comes up with a plan. I always store it in MD files because it's my preferred work of working. I can always switch to another session or another model, another tool when I have a
Yeah.
plan in MD file, right? So then I could even switch from Codex to Kimi to Open Code, or from Open Code to Codex, right? And just tell it
Does
like, oh, I have that plan in MD file. I just execute it.
does Codex have a Claude.md equivalent or
You
no?
mean Codex? It's
Yeah.
Agents MD.
So it
Agent
does.
MD.
It has
Yeah.
an equivalent HSMD.
Yeah, but
But you
yeah.
but you create a additional MD file, right? which is
I create additional MD files for basically every feature I work on. If it's
yeah,
something like larger, I just always like tell agent create a plan. I iterate
right.
with the agent, right? And then I tell it like, okay, that plan looks good. Store it as an MD file. So I have many MD files for different features, right? Even
Right.
today, I had a feature that was quite complicated. I even told it like, okay, split it into two plans. Create
Yeah.
one simple with version one, and then have another MD file with another plan, like a V2 of that
But
feature,
do you
right?
but do you then do you structure it as like whatever you call it, memory MD, whatever. But it's like, is it one continuous file or is it a file that has all like hyperlinks to other files?
Now, in
Do you
this
know what I
case,
mean?
I just have like those plans are not linked anywhere,
Okay.
right? Like
Yeah.
basically, I store as an individual file in
Yeah.
the project directory, right? Or
Right.
docs slash empty files, whatever, right?
Right.
And then each plan, it's like a how to call it, like a individual session or individual feature, right? So each empty file it describes some specific feature
Right.
in details, right?
Yeah.
And that's basically it, right? And then I can always fetch it, as I said, like use any tool I want, any LLM agent to tell it to pick it
So
and
this
execute it.
so you have separate MD files, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
okay. Yeah,
And then
that's
I
something
need
I
to do cleanups, right? I need to remove them. So I tell agent like,
right.
okay, look through those, remove those that are not necessary. And also like very often when it's like a bigger plan, I also tell agent like, okay, please execute the plan, but update the MD file with
Right.
progress. So that in case, session ends suddenly or something happens, I can always like resume it, or
Right.
even transfer to another tool if needed.
But if you're cleaning up and you're removing MD files, how does it have memory of then what it did? Like, of course, you can look through the code base, right? But would it have some understanding of that this feature was done or we did this, blah, blah, or do you have a log of that somewhere else?
Yeah, but that's something like I have a project documentation, right? So there is
Right.
like a high level documentation of the project, and it basically takes those like you have a plan, you execute, right? The
Right.
plan, and
Yeah.
then the outcome is okay, it's done, the plan is executed. So then I tell it clean it up and then update project specification with
Right.
just like a summary high level, right? So I don't go
Yeah.
that much into details. Like for example, feature like today, for example, I had some instructions or how keys should be used in terminal, right? I have like
Yeah.
a terminal user interface and there's like I don't have it in the high level specification, right?
Right.
It's too detailed, but at least there is information like, oh, keys can be used, there are shortcuts, etc. Right? And
Yeah.
if you want to dive deeper into the shortcuts, then that's on the code level, right?
Right.
I don't think it makes sense. It makes sense to duplicate information that's already in the code, right?
No,
Because
exactly.
you could have outdated documentation, and then the documentation, if you will not update it, you will forget. Then basically, you will have something different in the code, even
Yeah.
different key shortcuts or something. I think that those key shortcuts are a good example, right? Like you can have different keys in the code, whereas your documentation will be not updated, right? And then there will be some confusion, right? So
Exactly.
like a high level architecture document with project documentation. Sometimes I also have manuals, like for example, installation manual, etc. Right? Like what to do step by step in order to install, but like
Yeah.
details, some, I don't know, command line flags or that example with key shortcuts, etc.
Right.
That's in the code, right? So if you want to dive deeper into that, you basically have to tell agent like, okay, here is the documentation, but if I want
Right.
to see like shortcuts, just analyze it, like tell me, it's in the code.
But it's interesting. I don't know how Kimi handles that. It's like because I feel like the way without me giving it too many instructions, right? Opus or like Claude tends to have one continuous like it would have one MD file where it adds all the logs continuously until it gets to a point where it's so fucking hard to read that it exceeds its limit. So it has to like break, like it has to like read, like it can't read all the entire file. And I don't know if that gives me like bad results after a certain amount of time. But with Codex, I'm noticing that it always creates independent MD files for whatever, for a particular session. But if you with Kimi, like have you tried ever to just
I,
not? Yeah.
I think it's not about the model; it's more about the agents. So the desktop application, the CLI that you're using, right? So, and there is a difference between Cloud Code and Codex, right? Because those are agents, right, or applications, right?
Right.
Versus you have GPT, etc. I assume if you would plug in GPT
Yeah.
inside Cloud Code,
Right.
you would have different behavior, right, than you have in
Really?
Codex.
But
Yeah,
how is that? Why?
because there is the whole orchestration, right, and then the memory stored, etc. Like
Right.
it's on the application side, and then the application knows what to do, right, and then you just use pure LLMs underneath, right?
Right. Okay. So you say that okay, but if I was to run Claude code in or one of these models in the terminal, like a ton of people do, compared to the desktop whatever app, would there be a different behavior there, or is it rather that
uh,
you would?
Personally, I didn't check it, but I think they just use the command line tool underneath. It's like
Oh, they
integrated
do.
within the desktop app, right? So
Okay.
it's basically
Okay.
the desktop app is some kind of a wrapper on top of CLI, right? Like a more user-friendly
Yeah.
interface.
Interesting. Okay. But okay, so to kind of zoom back in on the whole thing about, Chinese models versus American models. And Uh, I think okay. I think this is something that is. I think everyone can agree on this, which is when it comes to reasoning and thinking, the American model seems to be performing better. I don't know why though,
Yeah.
but they seem to be performing better. And I've been trying to dig into why, like how is Opus trained, like particularly for coding, and how is Codex, which it seems like in the span of what 3-4 months they were able to just drastically improve their models when it came to coding. They sucked. Now they're apparently the best. And the China and I feel my view is it, but you're the one using it, and I've only used it a bit, and I had a bad experience, and then I just cut off using Kimi at fully. But so maybe I need to give it a try, but I just feel like when you give it when you're doing that planning step, it has to think. So one thing I figured out with Opus 4.7, Opus 4.7 is apparently on in Sonnet 4.6, I don't know if you tried it, but you can choose this thing called adaptive thinking. It has
Mhm.
you can choose a lower level model and have it to think more. So Opus 4.7 is apparently that default all the time. So it runs through these more steps of okay, what if you did this? So it runs through this thinking step way more
Mhm.
than any of the other things. So that, and you wrap it around and you call it 4.7, Opus, whatever. It does that really well, and I don't know why, but I've been trying to dig into how do these models work, and why is it that I'm reading here, and don't quote me on this yet, but GPT 5.5 leads at 82.6%. This is on the SWE bench, verified, the gold standard for real coding tasks, resolving actual GitHub issues. So GPT 5.5 is apparently the best. Claude Opus 4.7 follows at 82%. Then you have Gemini 3.1 Pro at 78.8%. I did not know that, but okay, that's good to know. And the Chinese models sit meaningfully behind on the hardest tasks. DeepSeek V4 Pro is at 73.6%, with Quen models clustering around 72 to 73%. So it's nearly there, but it's not there. If that's the benchmark you're measuring against, right? You can also
Mhm.
measure it against take costs and then execution, and then maybe it's going to be completely different.
I think
But
that
what?
there's a few things that make the difference, right? Like, obviously the tests you mentioned, right? But the costs, but also the speed. So
Right.
basically, what do they offer? How fast you can? Because you can wait like a 20 minutes or 40 minutes, right? Versus, half of that time, and that also
Right.
makes a huge difference. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. And you would say Kimi is quite fast, or
it's fast enough, although fireworks.ai, they have a faster, they host Kimi 2.6
true.
now before 2.5, and that was faster than Kimi for code, so
Right.
yeah,
And you still
inference
using
was faster.
Fire? You still using it, or is it
Not at the
now?
moment. At the moment, I have the Kimi for code, so the
Right.
default
But
Kimi.
but what is it that okay for you then? So one thing is of course what these benchmarks are saying. Subjectively, where do you feel like each of these models? Where do you feel like they're good, and where do you feel like they suck? What is it that, in the projects you've been working in, like, what is it that, where you feel like, oh, this is really great at this.
Uh,
But this,
Cloud, I think it's really good in terms of design.
I agree. I
I,
agree.
to be honest, I don't see like in terms of coding. Okay, I say it from my perspective, right? So in the way I prompt, so I tell it like a lot of details, what I expect and so on. So I don't see that much difference between GPT 5.5, Kimi, and even Opus, right? Maybe Opus is better at figuring out what's wrong,
Right.
right? And then GPT and the Kimi is maybe not that good. I need to spend more time. But really, like there is a huge difference in terms of designs, right? Execution, plan execution. I would say there's not much difference. Like if you will have a plan that I believe, like most people, they use different models, right? Like
Right.
what you said at the beginning, that you always have that Opus 4.7
Yeah.
extra high. I think
Right.
that's not the right way to do it. Like I would
Probably
just use
not.
that for planning and analyzing errors, right?
Right.
To do some investigation. But then if you have a plan, I would just do execution on something like a Sonnet, for example.
I agree with you. I think that's the only way you can survive on a $20 plan. I don't think there is any other way. But okay, so you basically but you haven't tried Gemini 3.1 Pro, which is apparently scoring really well, which I didn't know.
I think I did have a chance to use it in Trey for some
Yeah,
time, but I wasn't impressed. It was
no,
okay. Yeah,
it
but
was
nothing
this.
like yeah.
So I don't know, like, because I feel like all of these model providers, to get better at coding, they all it seems like it's purely a data problem, right? Like the based on, like, when I was looking at it, because I was asking, like, yeah, how was Opus, how did they were they able to get Opus, how were they able to get Codex 5.5, and it seems like you need to get these really hard coding problems that not everyone would have access to,
Yeah, but
right?
then you had Cloud Code, right? They started early, right? So they
Right.
had some time to collect that data. I'm not sure if they analyze the data, what are the terms, to be honest, but I assume they started early. They had more time to collect the data,
Yeah.
analyze, and they use that to improve models, right? Then there was Codex, but now Chinese are also pushing that. Like a news from today or yesterday, DeepSeek is building a team that will work on agents, coding agents. So basically, they will have
Nice.
like Cloud Code or a Codex agent.
I
Everyone is
re
switching to agents, right? Because even when you look at Cursor
Yeah.
or anti-gravity, they
Yeah.
just decided to change their offering, and now their main offering is agents, right? And IDs are somewhere behind,
Yeah.
like
Right. No, dude, I do hope that the Chinese models do go full agentic, that they keep the cost low, and they do surpass, because Claude Code is unbelievable. Like, they are, it's like, they are not, and I get that they're GPU strapped and all that stuff. Because yesterday I got really happy with the Codex. I was about to use up my usage. I don't know if you saw it, but suddenly it was 100% again. So Codex apparently resets their limits frequently. They even there's a guy who created a website for this. If you can check basically if Codex have reset their limits. And Anthropic never does this ever. They're
do,
just
do, do they do they reset them globally, or it's on a per user basis? Because
globe.
I saw it like today, like our weekly limit, the week will reset on 27th of May, right? But
Yeah.
after a few prompts, it updated, and the weekly limit got updated to like the end of the month,
Yeah,
31st, instead of
exactly.
27th,
It's
right?
it's 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 globally. It's globally.
Mhm.
Apparently, I looked at the expos. Apparently, there was some, like, they had done, there was a bug where the some caching issues, so the
Mhm.
users were draining more of their limits faster. So they just reset it for everyone. OpenAI is in a position to do it because they have a ton of they don't have, they're not strapped as Anthropic.
Mhm.
But the point I want to make is, I really do hope the Chinese can exceed these American models and still keep the same cost. That would be beneficial for us, the customers, Because right now I do not like a future where it's where you just fucking compute constraints. Unless you got a ton of money or you're getting an enterprise plan from your company, that would be a shit
Yeah,
future to be in.
but also that depends on what you're working on, right? Like banks will not use it.
What do you mean they won't use it?
Like in terms of like a data privacy, etc., right? They will not use Chinese models, right?
Yeah, but okay, so that's something we got to cover, right? Like, okay, so there, okay, but with the Chinese model, you could host that yourself, no?
You could, and there are platforms like Fireworks AI that I already mentioned, right? That they offer it.
Yeah, but if you want
But
to
still, the
self-host,
perception, I feel like the perception is still like even if it's hosted there, it's always like a Chinese model, even if it's open source. So for some critical industries, they will not use it. But
right?
there's many scale ups and many startups in US. I've heard it's around 80% of startups in US that they use Chinese models these days instead of American models.
But that is the thing is whatever reason they're doing, whatever reason they're doing for it. But let's say it's in the capitalistic sense of it. It is a good Trojan horse to get more data because all of them need more data, right? In order to get better models, and you don't need the uh hey, every fucking AI coding company has scraped this GitHub problem. You need the hey, we're working on codalytics, and the problem you're working on specifically for that, the back and forth where it's going the wrong path and then it's taking the right path. All of that data is now being you getting that and get training on that, right? Now, it's like you got Gemini is not even in the equation. Cursor maybe, but you got Claude Code or Claude models, and you got GPT models, and because everyone is using that because perception is they're great. Then you got Chinese models, they're wedges, they're so cheap, so they're getting more and more data. Maybe that's the reason that they can keep.
Yeah,
They
the
are.
question is if they are getting data, because I assume most of those startups they use those models, but they
Oh,
are not hosted in China, right? Like they may use those models and they are hosted like as I said,
that's
Fireworks.ai or self-hosted, etc. I don't know what Airbnb does, right? They use Chinese models, right? I think they use Qwen, but I think
but
they hosted.
for
Sorry.
coding or for support.
I think in their case it's just for business, like
Oh,
internal LLMs for processes, workflows, maybe part of the platform and so on. I don't know what do they use for coding, right? But my assumption was like from what I've heard, they are
right.
heavy in the Chinese models, right?
But okay, so ask me this: like, if you're self-hosting this or it's on-premise, whatever, like, is there any way that data can go back to the parent company? Like, of
No,
no way.
no.
Are you like you can't have even in like a you can't architect an escape like another because okay.
It's open source, right? So it's open source. If you take like an open source code, if there would be something that would like be sending data to China or somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Everyone would know, right? And then it would be,
Okay.
you know,
No, because I just wonder, like, it's like they need the data to get better. Why would they not make it easier for themselves to get the data?
but they are getting the data. They are getting the data in China, right? Like you also have programmers,
Oh
probably
yeah,
millions of programmers there, right?
of
And
course.
so
That is true. And I
there
guess
are even separate instances when you configure Kimi in open
yeah.
code. You have Kimi for code and Kimi for code China.
What have you
So
ever
there
thought?
are different offerings. I go for the Kimi for code,
But
but
but have you ever
not the
but
Chinese
have
one.
you but have you ever thought if Kimi 2.6 performs way better, like drastically better in Mandarin?
I know that the Chinese models are in general better in non-American and non-English
They are,
languages, right?
right?
So if you want to go like worldwide, it's better to use Chinese models
Yeah.
because they work better with non-English languages, right?
But I guess that is the strategic decision you would make, right? It'd be like, hey, we're going to give love to the English version of it, but we're not going to give it as much love as the actual Chinese main version of it. and that would be the edge because, like that model, like I guess you would have to understand Mandarin to be able to really use that model. And
Yeah,
I guess
but it also
most.
works for other models. My understanding is that Chinese models are also better in Thai than
Oh,
American models. That's my point. Like non-English,
okay.
the
So
average is
wait,
better for Chinese models than American models.
so you could take what the Kimi China and then prompt it in Thai, and it would like.
Not Kimi China, like Kimi, just Kimi, right? The
Yeah.
Kimi for coding and Kimi for coding China. It's just like I believe it's where the instance is hosted, right?
Oh,
One
okay.
is
Right.
outside of China, the other one is in China, right? Maybe
Right.
there is some local optimizations, right? But in general, what I'm saying is that Chinese models behave better than American models when it comes to non-English language.
Got you. Got you. Interesting. So then, okay. So then, potentially they would have way bigger. Their market is way, way, way bigger, right?
It is, but then obviously some countries, people they have a negative perception, right? We live still in that, Western bubble, whatever you will call it, right? And there is always like,
Yeah.
okay, it's better to use American
Yeah.
than Chinese. I think for business especially, but costs make such a huge difference that startups still prefer to use Chinese models, right? Because
Right.
if you pay 10 times less, right?
Right.
For obviously maybe a little bit worse model, right? But
Yeah.
there is still a huge difference, right,
So
in price.
would you, okay, this is actually a question for me, but also maybe for the world as well. But since you are a user of Kimi, right? It would be maybe like this actually this would be great for me because if I need to use a Chinese model as a non-coder, right? It would maybe be great to learn your tricks and tips for like, using Kimi because you're saying that okay, so it is great. Of course, you might have to prompt it a few more times with Kimi. The experience I had with Kimi was that it did this one thing that I didn't tell it to do, and after that, I kind of lost all faith. And then I was like, "Fuck it, I'm not going to use Kimi."
But
But
did you create a plan
no,
or
I
you
did
just
not.
prompted?
I think I just prompted.
Because I think when you prompt it, very often it just does something, right? But
Yeah,
you have to create a plan to have like a better defined scope, you
right.
know?
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I agree. But it's not like you create. So you're not creating the plan in the other ones and then bring it over to Kimi and then ask it to execute on the plan. You just create the plan in Kimi, right?
It's case by case. As I
Yeah,
told you, I have Codex, I create MD files. So sometimes I use Codex, for example, because I need more like an investigation or something, right?
yeah,
And then when I'm there, I already tell it like, okay, take that investigation results and create a plan on how to fix it, right?
right.
But then
Exactly.
it creates the plan. I save it
Yeah,
as an MD file, and then I take it to Kimi. And then I tell Kimi to execute it.
nice. Okay. Yeah, dude, I think I maybe need to like take that for a spin again. But you haven't tried DeepSeek 4 V4 at all for
No,
coding.
no. There's so much happening, right? So
Too much
eh,
happening. Way too much. But okay, so do you think that so you think it's a matter of time that before the Chinese will like
I
have
think if they can, first of all, like okay, you have to differentiate Chinese models hosted
yeah,
on
right,
Western
exactly.
infrastructure or Chinese models hosted on Chinese infrastructure, right? Because if you would have Chinese models on Chinese infrastructure and some cloud providers there,
Yeah,
or countries that have cheaper electricity or cheaper providers, you may have even a higher advantage in terms of price, right? Versus when it's hosted in, for example, US, right?
exactly.
Because electricity there is more expensive.
Yeah,
So even if
right,
the model is more like, I don't know, optimized
right.
or cheaper in terms of how much power it needs. The
Yeah,
price, power, the electricity difference also makes a huge difference, right? If it's 2-3 times more expensive than in China, the
right.
electricity itself.
Exactly. But then I wonder, like, are they getting like, if you take the amount of people using Kimi in China, is that comparable to the amount of people using, I don't know, Claude Code? or Codex in the
No, I don't
Western
think
world.
so. I think in China the most popular model is Quen.
It is. Oh, okay. And these are
Yeah,
two
yeah,
different companies, right?
and that's yeah. I mean, from what I know, Alibaba invested in Kimi. I mean, the creators of Kimi, but
Right.
Quen is from Alibaba. It's like their model, right?
Okay.
Alibaba invested in many different AI startups,
Okay.
but they have
Interesting.
their own model. They promote it heavily, and they also they created something that's called Token Hub. Yeah, I think it's like a division focused on LLMs, and
Okay.
basically they work on LLMs and I think agents and other AI related things, LLM related things there.
Okay,
And
because
Quen is the most popular, most downloaded open source model
yeah,
in the world. Yeah,
but you don't
I
use
think
that
they
one.
are also the most popular on OpenRouter.
And you're not using that one for coding, the Quen
No, no,
models.
no, no, no.
Why is that?
I just I just stick to Kimi, that's like
Yeah.
I as I told you, like it's too much happening, like a jumping
No, I
from
totally
one model
agree.
to another model.
No, but the cost of switching a model provider is high. But
I should it's not high because
no, it's subjectively high. As in, like you feel like you something is working, and therefore you're not willing to try something else. You're way more you're way better at that to trust these things. For
with
me, it
open
just
code
takes.
it should be easy, like you just provide an API key and that's it, right? That should be
Yeah,
easier. Still, like I have subscription here, then I would have to have another subscription and so on, switch between them.
exactly, exactly. But so aren't there any, like, isn't there a
I think that there needs to be like a significant difference, right, in terms of
yeah,
pricing, output, and so on. If
exactly.
if there is not that much difference, then it doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to try. Like
Yeah,
to pay and put that effort. If there would be like a significant difference between 2.6 Kimi 2.6 and Quen,
yeah,
then I would for sure give it a try. Right? We're assuming the costs are similar, or Quen would be much cheaper, right? But that's not
exactly.
the case, right?
Yeah,
And there is a difference between American and Chinese models, right? The Kimi and models and OpenAI or
yeah,
Cloud. That's why
right.
I decided to use Chinese, right? To give it a try.
Exactly.
And Kimi was my one of the first choices. I tried also GLM, Minimax, but somehow Kimi worked the best for me.
Right.
And now I didn't try the newest Minimax. Maybe I did 2.7, but there was not that much difference. So I decided to stick to Kimi. I had a
Right.
subscription for Kimi. So
Let's see how it goes. I just know that okay, so you need a ton of compute to be able to make better models, right?
mm.
And you're saying that of course in China it's cheaper to electricity is cheaper. So you can run things a bit more cheaper. But I do think that the like it's not as simple as, like, like I'm reading it from here, it's like it's not as simple as just running this, like, like reinforcement learning, and like a current approach everyone uses: model writes code, run tests, and then it's basically pass or fail, and then you reward signal. So it probably doesn't work like this. It's probably a bit more complicated, but it's binary and it only rewards the end state. It doesn't reward good reasoning, so only lucky outcomes. So a model can stumble onto a correct answer through a terrible process. And a model can do beautiful systematic debugging and still fail because the test suite was incomplete. Binary rewards can't distinguish these. So I don't know. Maybe okay. By the way, like in terms of like when we say that American models might be better in terms of their thinking step or whatever, this reasoning thing. Maybe that is because OpenAI and Claude have put more energy and love into this thing of, like, like it's not only about, hey, it's solving this problem. Did it solve the problem? Yes, no. It's also about, like, as it is solving the problem, how is it solving the problem? So, for example, something you and I can, and you can say that you can talk about that even more, but uh, like I don't know when the last time was when you actually checked the code, but all of these AI models create a ton of fucking unnecessary code even today, right? Like as in, if you use Opus 4.7 Max or you use GPT 5.5 extra high, it still creates it gets to the desired states, but it's just that the way it's getting there might not be the way a really, really, really good developer might have done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I don't know, like if that is something all of these companies are working on now. It's not only the hey, you're not giving it the like rewards, like you're not punishing it or rewarding it as it gets to the hey, it ticked off, it did the task, like I don't know, create me blah 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 application, and now it basically did that, and then you're
Uh,
rewarded for doing that.
I think when you use LLMs, the number of lines of code doesn't matter as long as the code is correct, right? So I think those LLM providers, they should rather focus on, optimizing them so that there is less mistakes, right? But
Yeah,
if it's like a
but
more optimized in terms of like short-term methods, functions, whatever, I understand the benefit from it, right? Especially if someone will read it as a developer.
yeah,
But if people just prompt it and use agents, right? And they as we discussed already, like Cursor even switched to agent mode. So it looks like people read, they don't use IDs even that much, right? They just
yeah,
use agents.
yeah.
So they should focus on minimizing the risk that there will be some like errors in the code instead of shortening the code, right? Like writing
But it
less.
doesn't it mean if it is less code, there is also less errors? Isn't that
I
a
think
fact?
it should be like that, right? But sometimes I believe that it will you can have like a short form of something that will do it, but it will be harder to understand, at least by humans, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's better to have like a longer code that it will be easier to understand, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. I guess what you're saying and what I'm saying is, of course, it needs to get to the desired state, whatever the goal is, and say, hey, and then you as the user using it, gotta say, okay, then that's approved. But then when you're continuing to working on it, and if you're working in an organization and other people are working on this code, then it doesn't give you more headache in the future. Because if it does, then in that way you have not actually like you've done something and it did reach the end goal, but now it's giving you more pain as you proceed. Then if you then look at like how much you've done and like how quick you got there and how much actually
Uh,
unnecessary fucking refactoring you need to do across a month, then like, and that's what I personally feel, but that's me as a non-developer, right? That I feel like there's a ton of refactoring, and I hope that a lot of these models get better on that, those actual fronts. Um. Okay. I'm tapped out. Wait, I'm gonna.
yeah.
I don't have more to say.